and I am here with my beloved friend, colleague, minister of justice and witness here at Clackamas UCC, Amira Stanley. Hi, Amira.
Hey, Adam. Hi, everybody. Good to be here again.
This is our second conversation on racism. And Amira and I had our first conversation 2 weeks ago. And we just wanted to come back on and have an honest, real conversation about racism and how we're dealing with it.
Yeah. Adam, I want to know how you felt after our first conversation. How did you feel after?
I had a mixture of emotions. I felt good. I felt like we had some good questions and comments from folks, and I was, I felt, I felt kind of bad because I left it at a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end because I was telling a story about how like a real story about how racism infects me and how you and I have both had to move through that racism together. And then you left me. Not intentionally. Amira's internet came off right as I was telling that story, and I was like, oh my God, my dear friend and colleague is now gone as I'm telling this story where I'm feeling vulnerable. And I just felt more vulnerable after I was telling that story and you were gone.
I know, I'm so sorry, but I did hop on really quick afterwards and I was looking at it and I was like, I'm with you, Adam. I'm with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was in that story, it's kind of funny because I was saying what happened in that story. I was right after the first book club that I did last year. I was going to go into how to be an anti-racism or how to be an anti-racist. And I decided to do self-compassion instead because I felt like people need to come from a different angle. And someone had said to me, don't you think that's feeding into white fragility? And I was explaining to you that story. And that's when you said, you know what I think about white fragility or fragility. So yeah, that was one of those situations where as a mindfulness person, I had to wait to respond.
Yeah.
And I think I waited like a day, maybe two, and responded. And I think the stressful part for me was waiting to hear back from you because everyone before that, when since had George Floyd, all the white people in my life, when I would try to bring things up to them, it would be an argument or they would cry or they would deflect, or so then the anxiety of like, oh God, he's going to deflect. And then I'm going to be like, like that was more, but then your response was like, I hear you. I see you. My bad. I'm going to do better. And it was like, oh, he didn't try to make me be the bad guy. Like, wow. Like it was actually very, very, very refreshing that I was able to say it. And you just received it. It may not have felt that way to you, but to me, I felt like you heard me.
Well, I did hear you. And just to get this off my chest for everybody who's listening, hey, Blue, it's good to see you. And
hey,
Villette,
Blue. Hey,
yeah.
Villette.
Just to get this off my chest so that I can confess, I like to think of myself as a woke progressive pastor who would never say anything really stupid like this. And I criticize the All Lives Matter movement as I should. But All Lives Mattered you in that moment, which was a way, it was me doing a white supremacist move. And as I don't know if you remember this, but as I was saying it, I was like, oh my God, this doesn't sound right to me, but it's going to come out of my mouth. And why is this not sounding right to me? And that was me putting you in a position where you had to teach me about my own white supremacy. And that's part of the burden that you have been having to shoulder as you are in a predominantly white church. But what I did was to say, we're all fragile. all lives are fragile, which is basically what I said, which was me. I think if I'm like being generous to myself, if I can be generous to myself in that moment, I was like, oh my God, Amira, I'm fragile. I'm like, I'm fragile in this, and I'm gonna F up. And like right in that moment, I effed up.
Yeah.
And
And it's
your
fine. Yeah.
well, it's like it's just like it's part of the learning experience, I guess, for me, because I've been preaching for the last since Ahmaud Arbery was killed a year ago this last week, and that was the first time when we went online, or the second maybe with our worship services, and I would be like, white supremacy sucks and it infects me, and this was a moment where I was like, you opened my eyes to seeing the white supremacy that infects me, as a progressive liberal, because as a lot of progressive liberals like to say, oh yeah, the racism is like those guys over there. It's the I don't even remember their names. Anyway, it's the people who live in the South, or it's the Proud Boys. That's who it is, right? It's always them over there, and I'm like, nope.
Yep. And people like me, I mean, I'm not perfect either. I make mistakes all the time. I watched a post from somebody that I follow who's she's an activist, and I look up to them, and she did a post the other day about stop saying BIPOC. And I'm like, oh no. And I immediately messaged her and I said, we need to talk. We need to have this on camera. Like, why? What is this? Let's break this down. Let's talk about it. Like, I'm learning too. It's okay to learn from someone else. It's okay to take what they have to say and maybe not decide to do it. It's all learning, but we have to talk about the uncomfortable in order to be able to like deal with it. And that's all I've ever wanted.
So why I think I've seen this too. Don't say BIPOC anymore. Do you know?
Well, I'm gonna wait until I talk to some people first. But I think from what I have seen is that you really want to separate Black people from other people. But you want to. Villette probably knows. If Villette's still on. Villette, we should have a conversation too.
Yes. Yeah, that's how I've heard it too. You want to separate, and people of color, like you need to name the racism.
Name it. Yeah.
That's there without saying, oh, just like putting people of color in a bucket.
Right.
Blue says, oops, bad word, church, sorry. Blue, we accept all words here. It's all good.
Yeah. Blue, you should know.
Let says it's the process of unlearning. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to unlearn. And we had, so I think that it's always an unlearning and an awareness, and owning of the racism that's in me. Jane Elliott explains it well. I'm a racist. And then the F word. Yes, it's good. So we had a comment last week from one of our members, Bill, who kind of talked about the Colin Kaepernick situation, how he was, I'm going to say a word that's probably racist. That's interesting. I was going to say how he was blackballed. I don't know if that's like, I should Google that and see some. It's another way of how I have been trained to think of Black as bad. My instant, like, Colin Kaepernick was done something bad to him, blackball. I don't know where that phrase comes from, but it's another way of saying Black is bad. Colin Kaepernick was not hired again in the NFL after he took a knee, and Bill took that to our attention, and also gave some history of other things that we could go on and on about how our Black siblings have faced racism, death, murder in our criminal justice system. He talked about that. And then he talked about one of the themes of our talk last week was, Amira, how you have been able to handle being a Black woman in a predominantly white church. And you came and we talked about how you were happy and smiling. And Bill asked if that was a way of coping or surviving in the United States, having to have a different, maybe a persona that you had to accentuate in order to be accepted in a predominantly white church, or a Oregon that is a predominantly white state. In white America, do you have to change who you are or accentuate certain things about who you are in order to, as Bill said, survive?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good question. And when we just talked about that question right before coming on here, and it was like, whoa. And I can distinctively remember being like age 21 to 25 working as a group home counselor in California, where there was several people of color that worked there. Our supervisor was white, but she was very open to all. My loudness, the way my eyes were, everything was like nothing was ever talked about. It was just that's Amira, that's who she is. When I moved to Tri-Cities, Washington, and that place I worked for 10 years, I distinctively remember my, your tone is too loud. Look at the way your eyes roll. Very nitpicky on how I was. And I did develop a sense of when I'm in these certain meetings, I have to act and be a certain way. I didn't really realize that until after hearing that question. So yeah, you do learn. And and I was telling you too that I kind of picked up that Valley Girl accent pretty early on as a kid. We went to Petaluma, California when I was probably like 8 years old, and the few other Black girls that lived around me, not a whole lot of us had like this thick Valley Girl accent like I did, and I don't know why I picked it up so quickly, but yeah, I was acclimated to it. But I also had the culture of my family and knowing Black is beautiful and all of those things. I was always confident once I got older in my skin and who I was. But you do learn, especially the last job that I had that I was at for 10 years. Absolutely. I definitely learned how to walk the walk and talk the talk when I was around certain people.
Your family taught you how to be comfortable in your Black skin and to think that Black is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I had an older sister. My mom had a lot of sisters. My dad has a lot of sisters. I've never seen any of my aunts, whether I get along with them or not. I've never seen a woman in my family say, "Oh, I'm ugly. Oh, look at my belly. Oh, look at my roll." I've never heard it in my family ever. Whether my mom was tiny or big, I've never heard her complain or say that she wasn't beautiful. So I did have that in my family and still do.
Where does that come from? Do you think that's intentional? Like, here's why I'm asking this question, because much in the United States, what I grew up with implicitly is to not see Black as beautiful. The whole blackballing thing. I think Blue and Villette say, I think that's code switching. I don't know. I'll have to. Does that make sense?
Code switching is more if I like say when I go see my Black side, I'm like, hey, yo, I don't do that. I'm Valley Girl all the time. I may be a little louder and a little bit more goofy. I may say a couple more cuss words when I'm around certain people, but I don't turn off the Valley Girl voice, doesn't turn off. But there's some people that like if they get around certain cultures, they're acting one way, and then when they get back to their normal and they're acting a different way. The Valley Girl is all woven within. There's no.
Got it. Okay. So I've been trained implicitly to see the Black body as dangerous, as as maybe more as violent. I was going to say more violent than the white body, but the white body isn't violent at all. It's the
Ah,
black body who I've been trained to see as violent through movies, through TV shows, through the news, and so there's there can be like an internal oppression. I've Black people can absorb that as well and start thinking of themselves as violent and more violent too, right? So
mhm.
is this was this an intentional thing that your family did, or was it just more natural?
I don't know. I don't know. I think it was natural. Um, yeah, I can't really say. That's a really good question. I don't know. But I know my mom's mom and my dad's mom were both strong, strong Black women from the jump with a lot of children, and they were just strong and strong women. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was natural. I feel like it was natural. Now, my parents leaving Chicago and choosing to move us into around white people, I think there was a, uh, you know, I'm assuming here. I don't know for sure, but I'm thinking that they intentionally made that choice that I don't want my kids to be raised how we were raised and have to
Mm,
deal with what they had to deal with. My dad was, he was a hustler, and I think that there was a point where he was like, I don't want my kids around this, and moved us out of that situation. I think that was intentional. But I think the loving and the confidence of being Black and who we are, I think that was natural.
wow. That's yeah. I mean, your parents were around during the Black Power movement, which again I've been trained to see as Blue says, the Black Power movement as more aggressive and mad. That's the white supremacy narrative of the Black Power movement. But the Black Power movement was basically just we're Black, we're beautiful, everything that you're saying that your
Mm-hmm.
family. It wasn't an aggressive over and against white people. It
Yeah.
was, hey, let's claim our own humanity.
Yeah.
In and what a beautiful thing that is.
Yeah.
So, um, Michael, you are able to ask questions. Yeah, go through some comments here. I think we left off at Brian's comments. Colin Kaepernick is an outstanding activist by example, pushing buttons and awareness with principle regarding the risk of graceful protest statement. Courageous man. One of the things that I am kind of interested in the Colin Kaepernick story, beyond everything that we kind of already know about his wonderful example that Brian is pointing out, is the recent comments by white people, especially commentators who, while Colin Kaepernick was doing his protests, were saying, "Don't do that. There are better ways you can do that." And pride in the flag and all of these, who were like really the white supremacist narrative. And now, many years later, they're like, "Oh man, I was wrong. I'm really sorry."
Yeah.
And there's a tension with me as I'm thinking about that white response, which is the tension of thank God you came to this point, and also I wish you had been at that point 5 years ago, and also what skin are you putting in the game now to make up for what you didn't do 5 years ago to change what we're doing now. It's not enough to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Colin Kaepernick, because I didn't support you then, but I support you now." Show us.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely not enough. It's a start, it's a start. I remember back when that happened, I used to not watch the news. Everyone knows that I wasn't into all that stuff. But I remember when I was doing my research about it, I was like, wait, a white man is the one that told him that would be the respectful thing to do, is take a knee. It was a white man who was in the military, and I would be arguing with people like, but it was a white guy who told them, and they're like, no, it's still disrespectful. And I'm like, I was so confused. And even then, I didn't understand white supremacy back then. And I'm like, why are people still mad? Like,
Yeah.
it was so odd to me. Like, he was told to do this by a white man in the military, to take a knee, it would be respectful, and people were still angry. And that, I mean, it blows my mind.
Well, I guess it's just like prophets. You know this. You are one of our modern day prophets. Make white culture uncomfortable. It holds a mirror to our whiteness and what we've done with it and the power that we've exerted over. Like Colin Kaepernick is like, let's not kill people anymore, and we're like, oh my god,
how dare you? How dare you?
Really, like, the flag stands for freedom for all, and we're not having freedom for all. So that makes white people like me, I'm going to own this, very uncomfortable, and I have to move through the discomfort of my whiteness.
I don't want to downplay someone recognizing, hey, I'm sorry I did that. I don't want to downplay that, because just that step alone is a lot. And even if you have to privately do it to yourself, I do want to recognize that is huge, and that is a huge first step to recognize, like, okay, I can see where I was a little wrong, and we all have it. I feel like there's so many of us Black people that are ingrained with white supremacy or reverse racism within ourselves, and even homophobia has a huge, in the Black community, it plays a huge role in my life, another passion of mine.
I have noticed, thank you for saying that. Because I have noticed in my life that it is when I have messed up is when I can learn the most moving forward by doing that, by saying, yep, I messed up, and thank you for pointing it out, and I'm going to try to do better.
Yeah.
So, but also doing better hopefully comes with explicit action, and trying to learn, not just saying I'm sorry, but acting it out. Let's see. Brian says, Amira, your family sounds loving and empowering, which is fantastic. Yeah, it's good. Amber says, in my limited experience, it feels like the Black women I know seem to embrace their bodies and be more body positive than white women I know. Is that something you see too? And if so, why do you think that is?
I see a mixture. I see a mixture. I know, like, growing up in Petaluma, California, there was a lot of, like, people that were actually very, in my eyes, very skinny would say, oh, I'm not skinny. But then when I moved more towards Washington, like Tri-Cities, Washington, I just felt like I was in culture shock. Like, the white women bred very thick out there. And I was like, dang. And they seem to be very confident in themselves. So I just really think it depends. I think as long as you love yourself, no matter what size you are, and even me, I used to be one, like, I had a couple really thin friends, and like, girl, you need to eat. You need some meat on your bones. It's like, that's totally rude. That's so wrong. Like, I'm learning too. It's all learning. We all have to undo causing harm to marginalized people in general, not just Black people.
Yeah, good. Michael says, before we go to Michael, Amber, I am becoming more aware of how the white church, I don't know if this is true for Black churches, but how the white church has done a lot of harm when it comes to purity culture, shame, which is basically a way of shaming women when it comes to sexuality, And I am going to be doing more research on this because it's something as a man that I have been blind to. I'm not blind to the fact that purity culture has been awful particularly for women, because it's a way of shaming women. Boys will be boys is what purity culture tends to say, and women are sluts for what they do with their body. That's what white Christian purity culture has done, and I think that relates to. I mean, it's all related to shaming the woman's body, which the church, which Christianity, which white loudest people in the room continue to do with women's bodies today.
Who would be good to talk to about that is my sister and my oldest niece, Lakeisha.
Okay.
Because they both have they've told me about experiences being in an all Black church and having to deal with that specifically. So,
okay. Yeah, that would be good. So that's kind of my guess on that, Amber, about why white women in particular might feel that way, and maybe it's the same for Black women too. That would be a good conversation to have. Michael says, I'm from Orlando and I recently left my local church because they supported BLM, but also white supremacy. When I questioned this, I was told it was the church's responsibility to reach everyone. This confused me, and I felt the church should take a stance and not play both sides. Was my thinking wrong?
So are they saying the church believed in white supremacy and Black Lives Matter?
I think, from what I'm understanding of what Michael is saying, is that his church both supported Black Lives Matter, but in a way that didn't challenge white supremacy, or was in a way that didn't want to name white supremacy.
Yeah.
Because you want to say you want to reach all people, which is another way of saying all lives matter. Right.
Yeah, that's part of the anxiety I felt a little bit within the church. Is like, are we just making it look like that we're anti-racist, or are we really doing the inner work, or what's happening? That's a true fear. That has been part of my anxiety. That's absolutely a true fear of, of that pressure of like, when I'm gone, is another person of color going to come in thinking that this is an anti-racist space, and then they're going to be harmed unintentionally. It's a huge burden that I'm learning to kind of release a little bit. It's really not my burden to carry, but I do want to educate my pastor and my church and my congregation on the proper ways to do things that we're not causing extra harm. And I feel that my church is about that. So
hopefully we're trying. Yeah. Michael, I think, Michael, that your intuition on that question is right. I think that you're handling it correctly. Mm-hmm. I think that the church, from my perspective, the church cannot all sides this issue. That's when the church gets in trouble. You look at the history of the church in the United States, and it was the all sides people who it was the all sides Christians who were okay with slavery. Why? Because, well, white slave owners need to matter too. And so let's just keep slavery. It was the Christians who were like, no, particular people matter in this. And so we need to fight against slavery because slavery is oppressive to a particular people group, and we cannot do that anymore. So whenever the church falls into all sides, when I fall into all lives matter or trying to all sides it, that's an indication to me that there's something not right here. Why? Because Jesus picked sides. When Jesus delivered his first sermon, he said, I'm here to, how does he do it? Let the captives go free. I'm here to give good news to the poor. Jesus doesn't say, I'm here to give good news to rich people. It's not that he's so much against rich people. It's, hey, you have it's saying to rich people, you have a responsibility in this world, and it's not for you to get more rich.
Yeah, we have to talk about it out loud.
Yeah.
You have to speak it out loud so that your people know where you're coming from. And that's the important piece of just slapping a label on your congregation. You really have to know, like saying that, okay, we're open and affirming. 20% of your church can really feel that way. And there could be 20 of solid of you really working toward being a certain way. But when people walk through the doors, what is the vibe? What is the sense they're going to feel? And if only 20 people, there's only 20 people in your entire congregation that are truly feeling that way, that marginalized person is going to feel that energy, and that's causing further harm. So we got to speak on it, and we got to come together about it.
Yeah. So yeah, Michael says the church would not denounce white supremacy because members of the church believed in it. So it's exactly what you just said, Amira. Yeah. So Michael, I think that you're right to leave that church.
Run.
Yeah. Right. Run from that church. There is a sense in which staying in a church like that, especially if you are in a majority group in that church, so that you could try to change things and challenge the white supremacy that exists within that church, could be a good thing for you to do, to stay in there to try to change it. But if it's too much and it's sucking your soul and it's too hard, you gotta, Jesus says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And sometimes loving and having compassion for yourself means getting away from a congregation that believes in white supremacy, or that there are, as Amira says, 20%, maybe 20% of that congregation is so emphasizes white supremacy and won't challenge it. And they're the power members of the congregation that you got to get out, because that's toxic. Yeah. So Angela says, Michael, this is honestly how I ended up here. The churches I was previously attending would have a weekend service about racism, but they didn't actually take a stand when it counted. They wanted to just say enough right things to cover their butt, but in reality, they didn't want to be uncomfortable at all. They wanted to play all sides for sure, and then point to a random weekend message of if they were called in or out about it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to be uncomfortable, y'all.
Yeah.
It's so hard to sit in it, but it's so good for growth.
Yep. Amber says it's the church's job to unequivocally denounce white supremacy. MLK in his Birmingham letter says that he was most disappointed. Oh, yes. Bring the MLK, Amber. He was most disappointed and hurt by white moderates who want quiet peace more than actual justice and equity for all. Woo, Amber, bringing it. That's it. So Amber, we thank you for that. We are trying to be accountable to that vision. And it's not, as Amira has been saying, not always easy. But we're here doing it. We're doing the best we can. And Amira, I'm so grateful for you, for our friendship, and for your, most importantly, for your leadership in all of this. I know it's, as we talked last week or 2 weeks ago, it's tough, but you're doing an amazing job, and I love you, and I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you so much.
And friends, thank you for being here and for asking your questions. And I think we're planning on having a couple more of these conversations. So we may, if you've got questions you'd like for us to go over in future conversations, you can put those in the chat section, and we will do it again next week or maybe the week after. Anyway, stay tuned.
Yeah, and I'll come back with some detailed information about that BIPOC question.
Oh yeah, that'll be worth talking about too. So anyway, thank you all. Michael, again, you're on the right track. Thank you for your witness. Sometimes the most faithful thing to do is to leave a church that isn't acting out the gospel. So you're in the right place. Villette, Amira, you are such an important leader in this. Love you. And amen. So, all right, friends, till next time, God be with you.